Welcome to another episode of the Redeemed Man podcast. Today I've got a friend of mine, Omar Mance. Omar, welcome to the show.
I'm excited to be here, Nate. Thank you.
So a little bit about Omar. He grew up in Atlanta. He played college basketball at LSU for a time and then went on to Rice, served with Athletes in Action, and was a high school coach and athletic director in the state of Georgia for some of his time. Went on to coach at Liberty, Army, Vanderbilt, Rice, and Tribeca most recently. And he's married to Rebecca, and they have an awesome son named Zion who's just getting back to school. Omar, you have been a staple in the basketball world. You love basketball. Tell us a little bit about how that love developed.
Yeah, no, I appreciate having me on the podcast. I'm really excited to be here. And I was a coach's kid. You know, I grew up in a coach's home. My dad was a legendary high school coach in Atlanta, and my brother played and my sister. And so when you're a coach's kid, you grew up around basketball. And so I loved it early on and played early on and had a lot of success. And so basketball has always been a part of my life.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned your dad. I know he is a legendary coach in the state of Georgia with 547 career wins, such a staple in the state of Georgia, and a huge impact among students. And I know that had to really play into so much of what you are as a coach today. Can you talk a little bit about what you learned from your dad, those things, those values that you picked up and that you continue to put into what you do today as a coach?
Yeah, I mean, my dad was awesome. You know, I lost him a few years back, and I remember going to the funeral and there being hundreds and hundreds of former players talking about the impact he had, not the championships, but just the impact on their lives, whether helping them get a job or helping them get a scholarship. There were guys that didn't play for him, different sports, and he helped them in their life. And so the word I use with my dad is legacy. You know, Eric Mance, Lithonia High School, Martin Luther King High School in the Atlanta area. Everyone knows Coach Mance for the impact he had on the lives of kiddos like me. And so, you know, a cool story is I remember a size 13 shoe, waking up in the morning, size Jordans. It wasn't my brother's, and it was one of his players that stayed with us for a while because in a tough situation with his family, and just the impact and the mentorship and the legacy that he left is why I coach. It's why I impact lives, because of the lives that he impacted.
Wow. Filling some big shoes.
Yeah.
So as you think back to his life, you mentioned that particular instance. Is there any other story you think about that really was impactful for you that you recall with your dad and the way he coached and the way he cared for his guys?
Yeah, I mean, again, you think about my mom was an educator. She's taught special needs for over 35 years in Atlanta. He was an administrator and coach for over 35 years. So they've always had this servant leadership mentality. And for them to lead their family that way was really important. So I remember being on the bench, remember going to practices as a kiddo, looking up to those players as big brothers. And, you know, the thing that he always did was talked about that he has an opportunity to lead them in a way they wouldn't go.
Yeah.
And just being from Atlanta and, you know, inner city, that, you know, there's so many other distractions for a guy from my demographic, just to get involved in gangs, drugs, jail, all that kind of stuff. And basketball was a way to teach discipline, but also for us to reach something that God has bigger than our environment. So for him, just being able to impact lives through coaching. And he stayed. He could have went to college and coached, but he stayed with us and coached me, coached my brother. And the value of family, community, and pouring back. There's so many of his former players who are entrenched in Atlanta who are successful because he helped them, you know, veer away from a gang, veer away from trouble. Like I said, just pulling some guys with their first job out of jail, they couldn't find a job. And just thinking the impact he had is I have an obligation, he would say, to give back, to lead, to guide. And so that's just set the tone for me as a servant leader, but through coaching, you know, through mentoring young people.
What a legacy. Yeah. You also mentioned your mom, and I got to hear you at lunch talk about your mom and what she's doing. Can you tell even now how she's serving her community? Because to me, again, that is so much to speak to legacy, not only your dad, but what your mom is doing now, and how, you know, where in a lot of ways at her age, you could say, oh, I'm just going to check out. But instead, she's really checked in to serving her community in even greater ways.
Yeah, I mean, just Teresa Mance, think about special needs, just serving the community as a teacher, just working with anybody that needed help. And so she always served. I remember, you know, she was kind of the pillar spiritually, which we'll talk a little bit about my faith journey, but she would make sure we go from practice, and I'd go be an usher. I'd go to choir practice. So she was always serving and helping, especially at the local church.
Yeah.
And so even after teaching and retiring and my dad passing, she's still involved in the local church. She's still serving them with the kiddos, and she's also working with people who graduate from high school who have special needs to transition to the real world, and then serving at a pantry. And so she's just a doer. She has such a heart to serve, and that was her life as an educator. She's not going to stop now. And so it's an encouraging to me that even after you retire, you're still serving your community, you're still serving. And that's the motto of Christ, to serve and not be served.
Definitely. Yeah. You mentioned your faith. Yeah. And for me, that's one of the things that if anybody knows Omar, has heard his story, watched him, it's obvious that you're a man who knows Christ. It's obvious that you pursue the things of God, and it comes out of your life. How did you come to know Christ, and how did your relationship kind of develop over the years? I know being a college athlete, sometimes that can be challenging. Was that a season of growth, or what did that look like for you?
Yeah, I mean, just even connecting the dots from my mom and my upbringing, train up the child in the way that they should go. And so my mom really instilled these seeds growing up. And so I would say I went down the aisle and became a Christian as a young kiddo, but I always said I had a form of godliness, but denying the power thereof. So I knew it. My mom was awesome. I had the foundation. But part of my journey is at LSU. So I'm at LSU. We're the number 2 recruiting class in the country, or number 1 and number 2. And things are great on the surface. And God intervened like he always does, inflection point. And here I am playing, starting. All the things off the court look great. And those seeds that my mom and my local church, Antioch Lithonia Baptist, right down the road, they instilled in me came true. And I remember getting on my knees and saying, I got to be all in. And it was an inflection point in my life where God and Christ became on the throne. As opposed to talking about it, I had to live it. And it was just really this moment in my life that everything on the surface seemed like it was going well, but inside it was empty, and that it was a personal relationship. And so that inflection point at LSU propelled me for what I'm doing today, to go to 8 different countries and do ministry and missions and impact lives for Christ through coaching and through playing. And after that moment, it became real. And so my entire life trajectory changed because not only the foundation from my mom and local church, but also a moment where we all have that moment in our life where, Paul to Saul, or Saul to Paul, and Jacob to Israel, where you can't come out the same way. You come out different, and your life has changed. And so that was a little bit of the story for me.
Well, that as an Auburn fan, that's just a testimony that good things can happen in LSU.
There you go.
So I'm thankful for what God did in your season there. Yeah. Can you talk a little bit more about your basketball time and time at Rice, and as a college athlete, some of the things you learned, some of the relationships you developed? And because I think so much of the heart of us talking about sports and Christ is, how do we tear down walls and barriers? And I think sometimes, most often, when we see people really let go of barriers, they find a commonality outside of something that they're not, that brings them together. Different communities, different backgrounds, and we come together around a common thing. And so how did that work with basketball and your time at LSU and at Rice?
Yeah, verse Proverbs, we have our plans, but God directs our paths. So I have all these plans I want to do in life, and God has, ordained the time, your steps. Your steps are ordered. And so for me, going to LSU, I'm thinking I'm going there to play basketball, to get to the NBA and all this. And really, I was going there to really meet God and to change my life. And so LSU was a great place because it really got me in lockstep with a personal relationship with Christ. So I leave LSU, I end up transferring to Rice. And one of the mentors who we can talk about a little bit later, the head coach there was a Christian, was a mentor, Willis Wilson. He actually helped me found this nonprofit that we started, and he's still pouring into my life to this day. He gets me to Rice, and literally the guy he pairs me with is another guy who's on a similar faith journey. He ends up being my best friend in life. We're in each other's weddings. We start a Bible study on campus. We're able to share who we are. We're able to grow in the faith together. And I ended up having a great career there, traveling the world, and God used basketball to further the kingdom, where I was using basketball, to play at LSU. Just the parallel. And what's cool is my younger sister, ended up coming to Rice with me, and to see her grow in her faith and be with her big brother. You couldn't have painted that picture that God would do something with me at my highest of high in basketball at LSU, which personally was probably pretty low, and then transform that to Rice, where I have one of my biggest mentors, godly leaders, and the head coach there who stuck with it, and some of my best friends in life who we had a spiritual journey together, all at one place, and cap it off with my sister. So it's a pretty cool story.
Definitely sounds like a special time when you were there. So you finished it at Rice. Did you know that you planned to be a coach after that? What were your plans and goals? And then how did God chart your course? Because you've been doing a lot with coaching over the years. And how did you end up in that spot?
Yeah, I think every player coming out is looking at playing professional and doing all these great things. And, we have our plans, but God directs our paths. And I had a great career. And right out of it, I ended up getting injured. So I hurt my elbow. And so I had to have surgery right during tryouts. Mm-hmm. So there was this pause where guys like, okay, maybe basketball's not in the cards. And during that surgery and time where I'm thinking about trying to go overseas, trying to play pro, NBA tryouts. So I had a lot of things going on. And I'm like, okay, I'm coming back. I'm getting ready to play NBA and pro. And then I had another injury, triceps tendon tore. So I'm like, all right, God, you're opening some doors. And so in between NBA tryouts, in between trying to play pro, I went on a tour with Athletes in Action to East Asia. And it was an all-star team. We're playing against all the professional teams and all that. And it changed my life because I was able to see how you can minister, how you can go over, and how you can be an impact, how basketball is so big internationally, and how the impact you can have on a culture, a community, and people. And during that time, I started a youth company in Chicago at the same time. So I'm coaching kids. I'm going on a tour. I'm traveling international. I'm like, all right, Lord, if I go to NBA, okay. But if not, man, I really see how God is doing something through me here. And so we started a company in Chicago, a youth company, went from 10 kids to 1,000, and went on multiple other tours, playing professional, but also some missions and ministry through Athletes in Action and some other organizations. And I just had a heart to give back, thinking about my dad, right? Thinking about my mom, thinking about the legacy they left, that I could impact young people's lives through basketball, for Christ. And so ended up getting into coaching and been in college coaching for over 15 years, as you mentioned, back at Rice, Army, West Point, Liberty, Vanderbilt. We've just been truly blessed to impact people's lives. Like my life was impacted as a student athlete, as a player.
Speaking of those students whose lives are impacted, how do you see basketball, other sports break down barriers that are there to the gospel?
Mm-hmm.
Because I know a lot of times people have had negative experiences, or they think that Jesus is one thing that he's not. How have you seen that common ground around sports be an avenue for you to share the gospel?
Yeah, I think that there's a couple different ways. One, obviously, from a leadership perspective, is I use the word, when you're a coach and you're focused on God's work, is discipleship.
Right.
Like, literally, you're discipling these young people in the way that they should go. Follow. Do what I say, not as I do.
Yeah.
A lot of coaches, right? Hey, just do what I say, not what I do. But as a believer, as a leader, as a godly leader, your charge is to do and to model what it looks like to be a godly husband, father, and leader. And so you're hopefully modeling and discipling them will be the first thing as you think about coaching. The second, I just use these two words in sports. If you're in sports, as in youth sports or any kind of sports, you should always balance between resiliency and humility. And John Maxwell talks about this quote about, you should always be this pendulum of resilient and humble. And think about just through scripture, like there's so many things where you think you're on top of the world and God humbles you. And so no matter how much success you have in athletics or sports, no matter how good it seems, just remember the tough times. Remember the heartaches, because if not, you'll get humbled. Either you're humble or you'll be humbled, right? So you're constantly thinking about humility, number one, with success. With failure, you're constantly thinking about resiliency. Christ just continues to talk about, don't get weary in well doing. Like all these things, there's a purpose and a plan, like stay the course, like try through fire, like we'll purify you. So when you're down and out and things don't go well in sports, you have to constantly think of small victories, little victories, how to be resilient. So to me, the two lessons are resilient and humility. How do I balance that? Well, it's God's word. It's through prayer. It's through connecting through the source. So I think that in sports is really important. Leadership, obviously, but just balancing between humility and being resilient, because it teaches you lessons of how to bounce back. You have a bad day. You can't just quit the team and hey, I just need a new coach or a transfer, right? I mean, maybe you transfer, but you only get so many transfers. So you're just constantly thinking of those two things.
So as a coach, how have you had to practice those two things? I mean, because I think, there's a lot of pressure on you guys leading students, but then also serving in coaching staff. How have you had to learn those, and how have you applied those to your career?
Yeah, every adversity, every trial, it has all been to the glory of God. All things work together for the good of those who love
Amen.
called according to His purpose. So you think about all things, not some things, not the wins, but the wins, the losses, the promotions, the firing. So through my journey, I've seen every time there's been adversity or trial, God's done something great through it. Part of the story how I met my wife is when we were let go at Rice. I had margin in time, and I was introduced to her, which we can share that story later for sure. It's something that I just think, man, I wouldn't have met her. Think about the times of adversity within our marriage, just thinking about having kids and all these things, and God blessed us with our miracle son. Zion, you mentioned, and seeing what God did through that. So to me, just knowing through the times that I've gone through that have been really difficult as a coach, whether we're lose a job, that God is doing something, and God is really focusing on, and you probably understand this term from transformational versus transactional.
Yes.
And when it's transactional, to your point about the adversity, everything's down and out. Man, we didn't win. Man, we didn't succeed. Man, when it's transformational, you see the wins that God was doing, transforming the lives of those of you around. So every time that there's been adversity or tough heartache as a coach, I think about transformational coaching, the lives that were impacted, the players that we had, the things that God has done through our mess, right? Through our adversity. God's like, see, I was trying to prepare you for something. Just holding on to those things, holding true to those have been key for me as a coach throughout these years.
You guys don't need to miss that part on transactional versus transformational. I think that's such a key thing for us to all really reflect on. And are we living our lives that way, where we see things as transformational or transactional? You mentioned Becca. So tell us a little bit more about her and how you met, and then also a little bit about your son, Zion.
Yeah, I mean, as most godly men who know the real deal, my wife, Becca, she's the superstar. She is the stud and godly woman who loves the Lord, but also who loves sports, which was the great, brought us together. And I mentioned a little bit, we were in a season where Coach at Rice had got let go. I was a young assistant. I'm figuring it out. And she, at the time, was working at FCA, at their headquarters.
Okay.
And they had a ministry event at the Final Four. They had ministry events for coaches. And so she was actually putting on the event where my coach was getting a Barnabas Award. And so here she is serving in coaches and working in sports and ministry. And I'm there, in a transition. And God just really developed our time together. And I always say, I think in that time, if I was at Rice still coaching, I would have been on the road recruiting. I would have been talking to players. But I had margin of time to actually build a relationship.
Yeah.
And God used that time for us to connect. And, she loves ministry. She loves hoops. Her dad's a pastor, Jim Carter. He's done a ton of things and planted churches all over the country. They're at Riverside Church in Lynchburg. And so to have someone who loves the Lord, but also loves hoops, we were able to connect at the Final Four. So the Final Four is kind of where we met, and also it just merges our lives together. And so she's awesome. She's everywhere we stopped, even how we got connected. She's ministered and mentored girls and athletes wherever I was serving. So we always said our marriage is a ministry. So wherever I am, she's going to plug in and minister, and that's why I love her, and that's why she's the stud because she's been able to do it no matter where I am.
Yeah, you mentioned her mentorship, and that is our connection. You guys were at West Point. My wife was at West Point, and so even again back to our lunch before our podcast, my wife was talking with us and just mentioned that of studying Revelation with your wife and how impactful her life was on her in that time. So for you, before we get to Zion, I want to dig in a little bit more. How has she supported you over the years, and how has she navigated those seasons where in coaching it can be pretty brutal when you get let go or things aren't going? What has she learned, and how she helped you be the man of God that you are today? Because I really know, at least in my life, that is a huge difference maker in how I feel about myself is how my wife looks at me.
Yeah, no, the impact that she has had on me, the patience, just the ability to take whatever comes at us and hold it together. She's held our house together, held me together. You know, we'll talk about being vulnerable and being authentic. She's been able to do that with grace, and I think it takes a special woman to be a coach's wife.
It does.
We move so much as, you know, military pastors, like we move, and so she's just held together, which is why I love her so much. She's the rock that she's been able to do it, and the biggest is because her faith is so strong that she can see my flaws and my weaknesses and know that it's God in me. It's not flawed Omar, you know, and I think you talk about your wife Liz and just the mentorship. We've got more out of those relationships for her to disciple and minister and mentor, because it's like, okay, the purpose here was not only for me, but it's really for our family. It's really for her, that God was using her through that. And so she's been able to build authentic relationships and have great friends, knowing that she could be packing the boxes to move the next day based on our job.
Yeah.
And so her patience, her grace has really helped me as a coach, because she is so faithful. That's why I love her. And I think God places people in your life that you need when you don't know you need them. And they're perfect for you, as you said. And she's a perfect complement because she's so gentle and kind. It allows me to, you know, to fluster and be an idiot at times, you know, and she's able to really support me in that. So, yeah, she's been amazing.
So you mentioned your son, Zion. Tell us a little bit about that miracle and even today, the joys that he brings as a father.
Yeah, I mean, you know, let God be true and every man a liar. Like, you know, we've had a bigger story just about, you know, will we have kids? Can we have? And just a lot of different things on that, and just prayer for family. Our prayers, just right, you know, Lord, give us a kid, or just bless us with the gift of a young kid, and our journey from West Point, where our connectivity was getting to Liberty from West Point, and taking a leap of faith to go down there because we loved it in New York, loved all that we were doing, and we just felt we needed to be closer to family. Her sister lives there. Her parents ended up planting a church there. We're in Atlanta, so New York to Virginia is a little bit closer than Atlanta. And just really felt God would, you know, bless us and get us ready, and our son, and becomes this miracle baby that we have. And we just remember taking a drive on the Blue Ridge Mountains and seeing God's creation. And my wife just had this crazy appetite for just eating anything. I'm like, all right, something's not right here. And we just think about the journey, the prayers, the faithfulness. And her name is Rebecca. And you think about Rebecca in the Bible, and just how you just can't make up the story about God blessing us with a son. And so anyway, his name's Zion. You know, his favorite verse is Psalms 1, just rooted and planted, meditating on God's word, just streams of water. And we just talk about his energy and his excitement. And as a coach's kid, he thinks all the players are his brothers, and he could just run on any court and grab a ball. You know, we went to a Final Four together, and my dad took me to a Final Four, so that was a cool kind of a moment of me taking him. And he's just like, oh, this is great. We're going next year. I'm like, hey, bud, that's not normal. I'm a coach. So going to Final Four games, seeing Coach K's last game, all that stuff is cool. But so he loves it. He's got a joy and a smile and an energy. And every time we see his joy and his smile, we know that is God's blessing and miracle for us. And so, yeah, Zion, all the players, everybody knows Z. When they see him, they know who he is. And obviously, he's a blessing for us.
But I can imagine his joy just watching and being around Dad. Reading this week about how important it is with your kids to work with, bring them to work, and that is your work. And so for them to be able to be a part of that and see the impact you're making on those guys, modeling it for him just as your father modeled it for you. So that is really cool. So currently you guys are in Franklin, Tennessee, in kind of between jobs. Can you talk a little bit about this season and what God's doing in you in this season where it's rare, right? I mean, you're getting some slow time.
You never have time to rest, recover, replenish. You know, on here it says restored. You know, you never have that time as a coach. You're always on to the next thing. You're either getting promoted, or if you get let go, you're looking for a job. But part of the reason we were at Trevecca or in Nashville with Vanderbilt got us to Nashville, and Trevecca sustained us as community. We had a lot of community there, got plugged in with some believers, got plugged in with some families, got plugged into a local church, Church of the City Franklin, which we served there. I was blessed to be an elder there. And as a coach, you don't do that. You don't get plugged into a local church because you're always moving. And it's been such a blessing for our family because my wife's been able to connect with women there, small groups, mentorships, Bible studies. I've been able to connect to a consistent Bible study of men just being authentic. And that's right around the time where I lost my dad as we first got there. So to think about how God literally surrounded us there, this has been a blessing to be there as long, but also in this season, like we've been in transition before, we're not in a rush. And to have margin, to have time, to take time just to be with family, take time to restore, to replenish, to do work on your personal self. As men, we don't like to do that. We don't want to go deep. We don't want to go to the dark places, right? We don't want to have a safe space. So just even to create safe space with other godly men has really been an encouragement for us in this season. And we're excited because God's got a lot of things that are going on, from the nonprofit to coaching things to the community in Franklin. But he's had us rooted and planted there in a way that you can't take that from your family. Yeah. As coaches, as men, when you have consistency with your wife and your kids,
no doubt,
you want to provide that stability. So it's been an incredible time of restoration and just God doing a work and being able to come here and do this amazing podcast, so we're blessed. We're blessed in Franklin. We love our local church, and it's something, we don't take it for granted because God does that for a purpose for the time that you need.
Well, the Redeem's all about that supportive community of men. Mm-hmm. And like you said, a lot of men don't feel safe to take off the mask or really be vulnerable with who they are. As someone who is a public figure, I mean, you're in a situation where people are looking to you. How have you kept those relationships and fostered those relationships and really learned the importance of them in authentic relationship with other guys? Because I think a lot of people, the best experiences they have are the teams they played with, the military guys and gals maybe they served with, and not the church. And I think that's a shame. What have you seen in the church, and what could you encourage other guys in with that?
Yeah, I think no matter if you go through life, at some point you're gonna go through adversity. If it hadn't happened, get ready, it's gonna happen.
That's right.
Right. And when my dad,
coming.
Yeah, it's coming. And when my dad passed, that was an inflection point where I had raw emotions. I had feelings that I grew up. You just tuck it away.
Yeah.
You just can't deal with it. And what God provided in Franklin, and I would encourage all men, is put me around a group of believers, a group of godly men that you are accountable to.
Yeah.
Weekly. We were weekly Bible study and discipleship, and these guys are pouring into me. They're creating space to be okay with not being okay. Yeah. Creating space to allow us to do some, we call it EQ work. That's emotional IQ, where you're going deep into what is these feelings? What is your family origin? Like, go back to the root. And that work happened when we were in Franklin. I was able to do that out of COVID, where you're literally spending time with God. You're spending time with godly men. My wife is going through it with me, and it gets hard and it gets difficult, and you have to have support. Yeah. And the way I grew up, you don't get help. You don't go to marriage counseling unless something's really wrong, right? Like, you don't get that help. And now it's like, no, it's okay.
Yeah.
Because if you don't let it out, I always say, if you got these feelings, you tuck them in, you push them under the bed. At some point, the boogie monster's going to come out. You can't just tuck it under the rug. You got to deal with those feelings. And usually as men, it comes out in the wrong way.
Yeah.
And so being able to have that community, godly men surrounding me during that time was great. And it spurred us to start a nonprofit that did something similar and do a lot of EQ work and a lot of just things that really focus on being authentic.
Yeah.
Like you said, take the mask off, create space. You're not going to be judged. Everybody's in a place of redemption. We all are sinners saved by grace. We all are fallen men in a broken world, right? Broken men in a fallen world. Like, that has been transformative for me in my life as a husband and a father, just having that space and having these different groups of men to really pour into me. That would be my encouragement. You have to make sure you're surrounded.
Yeah, it's essential because when you fall, you will need that community. And when you're struggling, emotion, I mean, we never know when something tragic is going to happen, and you have those guys you really can lean on and let know what's happening in your life, which is super important.
Yeah.
Thinking of your time in coaching, I know there's coaches who've influenced you. Mm-hmm. So tell me a little bit about some of your, like the coaches who have impacted the way you coach, but then also mentored you and impacted your faith and how you incorporate your faith in your coaching.
Yeah, I mean, I've been blessed to have some great leaders, some great basketball coaches, also godly men. It's men, I'll hit a couple of them real quick. One is Richard McKay, who's at Liberty University, who's a mentor of mine and a godly leader. They're having a great basketball program. But we met in Nairobi, Kenya. We went on a missions trip together for coaches, built a school, helped the school build, helped clear out space, get a basketball court in the slums of Nairobi, the second largest slums in all of Africa. And so we're doing work together, pouring into a community. And we go back, and I'm like, this is different. There's not many coaches in the country that are focused on missions and ministry. And so we built a relationship. He's been a great impact. I worked with him at Liberty. Bryce Drew, who I worked with at Vanderbilt, who's the Drew family. Scott Drew's his brother at Baylor, national champion. His dad, Homer Drew's Hall of Famer. And Bryce played in the NBA and made the shot, SEC country. Ole Miss doesn't like that shot he made. But another godly person who lived it and was able to see him as a godly husband and a father. Richard McKay, same thing, godly husband and father. Dale Laird, who was at Liberty, same thing, godly husband and father. But the one I'll kind of highlight today will be Willis Wilson, who was the head coach at Rice. And he recruited me. I didn't give him the time of day, went to LSU. And because of the godly man he was in recruiting, I came back and transferred there. And again, I go on a visit. We go to church on an official visit. That's not even legal. I mean, what coaches are taking you to church on a visit? And he pairs me with a guy who's in a similar faith journey who ends up being my best friend. Fast forward, he hires me to be in my first college coaching job at Rice. Same guy that recruited and I played for. He gives me my first job. When he retires, he's all-time winners coach at Rice and at Corpus Christi. When he retires, he's investing in the nonprofit we started and pouring into young men and helped me co-found it. And so he's been an integral part of my life, especially when my dad passed, to say, hey, I got an obligation to lead and help you with this legacy. And so I'll highlight Willis Wilson at the end of a winningest coach in 2 universities, but also a godly mentor who's done it from recruiting to coaching to hiring me and even post-coaching poured into you. So 3-level discipleship.
Discipleship happens in relationship, and that's the part that is obvious when you talk about him. And I think so many times we really miss is look around you and see those people who you can do life with who maybe are younger in the faith than you are, and how can you encourage them? How can you walk beside them? Discipleship is huge in helping us learn more, to grow in our faith, to mature, and to have those people around us who invest in us. And I know you're investing in other people. Speaking of that, with your nonprofit, talk a little bit about how that came about, what you guys are doing.
Yeah, I mean, you hit on something that was really important. We started a nonprofit called the Circle Legacy, and it's focused on legacy, leadership, and discipleship, and it's all rooted in prayer. And John Falwell, who does missions trips through Athletes in Action in Israel, had this phrase that just transform everything. You can't live your life without a rabbi, and you shouldn't die without making a disciple. So as you're living your life, you have to have someone pouring into you, top down. Think Paul, Timothy, Titus. Someone's pouring into you. And then you have to make a disciple. You have to pass it on. You have to be mentoring someone. So in COVID, we're all in lockdown. And I just felt like Willis Wilson, some of my mentors, a lot of Rice guys there. And we're scattered from NBA on down. And I said, we got to get on a prayer call. We just got to pray and connect through Zoom. So 5 guys goes to 10. And they're like, man, I got a guy who really appreciate this. And we're able to talk about leadership, development, authentic, talking about the struggles of marriage and, who's coaching the coaches, who's leading the leaders. These coaches are high profile and they don't have time to think about themselves. They're always thinking about their players and where they're going. And so literally we started from a Zoom call that was 5 to 10 to 30 to 40. And it was so powerful. And after that first year, we ended up meeting up and having a retreat and a round table to just grow and just sit in 24 hours and just lock in. How do we be better men? How do we pour into each other? How do we hold each other accountable in every area? And just got a great nudge with Coach Wilson and some others that we got to make this legit. And so it became a 501c3 nonprofit focused on discipleship. And now we've gone from 1 group to 5 to 6 groups of 30. So we could serve over 150 coaches.
That's
in NBA, college, front office, agents, all different flavors in small groups coming together, disciple, authentic, take off the mask, creating space. It's been one of the best joys I've had. The CircleLegacy.com, it's transformed my perspective as a coach because it shows what we need as men. We need accountability. We need men that can tell us the truth.
So important.
you're struggling with your marriage. There's a guy who literally turned down multiple jobs because his marriage is struggling, goes to marriage counseling. They figure that out. God opened up doors that he couldn't open. And so everyone has testimonies through this group, but it's really started with Rabbi having mentors and leaders pouring into you, and then us discipling others. And so you got an array of leaders on these groups, and God has really used that as a transformative thing in my life for sure.
Go make disciples of all nations. It's not converts, it is disciples, and it's a process. We want people to come to know Christ, but we want people to grow in Christ, and knowing Christ is a process, because when we come to saving faith, there's so many things we don't yet grasp about who we are or who he is. And so I love what you guys are doing with that. So kind of throwing you a curveball with this. So, this one's probably not the best one to ask a coach, but I have to know, who is your favorite basketball player to watch? Like, current basketball player that's out there, you're like, man, I love watching him.
Yeah, it's that is a curveball, because I'm old school, so I go back to MJ and Magic. I would say right now the one guy I always think about is Giannis, and I know he's not from here, but the thing about him, and think about this parallel, his brother is on the same team with the Bucks. His younger brother, so there's two brothers on the regular team. His younger brother's on the G League team. That's the minor league team with the Bucks. And his other brother's in the NBA. He's got 4 brothers. And everything about him is family. Everything about him is team. He doesn't care about posting videos and working out. He doesn't care about any of that. He's just curious about his team and winning. And, from his humble beginnings to where he is, skinny kid, wasn't drafted high, to taking that team to a championship. And and part of that, one of my best friends in life is with the Bucks organization. Okay. We talk about the Rice connection. One of the guys with OKC, Mike Wilkes, the other guy, Artie Culver's with the Bucks. And he just talks about the humility he has. So I know a little bit behind the scenes, so you kind of root for a guy when you know the things he does behind the scenes. But I'll say Giannis. I mean, he's dominant, he's attacking, but he has this humble spirit, this mentality, is competitive, and I just love the connectivity of his brothers and his family, and how he always wants to lift people up. So that'll probably be my answer right now, is no dog in the fight.
I see that. You were a little political, I think, in that one. So I know there's a lot of opinions out there. Sports can bring out some very strong opinions.
Oh yeah.
If you don't have a basketball in your hand, what would be the sport you're participating in?
Yeah, I mean, growing up in Atlanta or growing up in the South in Georgia, it's got to be football, right? I mean, you're a football country here. So SEC country, half my friends either play basketball, football in the SEC, including me. So I'm playing football.
So what team did you pull for growing up?
Well, Atlanta fans are fickle, just so you know. We do not stick with our team. So I'm a Falcons fan when they're winning. When they're not winning, I'm not cheering for anybody. So, I'm Atlanta, so it's all Falcons, Braves, Hawks. So, yeah.
What about college ball? Because you went to LSU to start out. So, where did you land with college ball?
Yeah, I think when you're a college coach, it's hard to be a fan of a team other than you're always rooting for your buddies, right? Yeah. So if I got buddies scattered across the country, so I'm always rooting for them. But when you grow up in the South, where we are down here, you're SEC country. And, I went to the SEC. So any SEC team, Georgia is probably the team I cheer for, is right down the road from where we grew up. And so between Georgia and Georgia Tech, now that Georgia's winning, I could cheer for them.
I was fixing to say, a lot of people have jumped on the Georgia bandwagon recently.
That's for sure, for sure.
Well, Omar, just another thing that, to me, again, because of who you are, I would love to know is, what's your time in the Lord look like right now? What are you studying? What are you learning in that season? What scriptures marinating in your heart that you're just excited about, that is bringing a freshness to your relationship with him?
Yeah, the scripture for this whole year, this season with our team was Galatians 6:9. And don't get weary in well doing, for in due time you shall reap a harvest if you don't quit. And then you extend out to verse 10, so do good to all people, especially those in the faith. So that was kind of during the season, don't get weary in well doing. Okay, why? Well, because you're going to reap. If what do I need to do? Don't quit. And so be good. So that's something that's always resonated. Like, man, it's tough, it's difficult, it's hard. Don't get weary. I always use this analogy. As believers, we take the scenic route. The world, they take the highway, they take the HOV, they take the fast lane. In the scenic route, you see what God is doing along the journey. you're able to see what God's doing in your life. And so don't rush the process. Just don't get worried. But what has struck me the last couple months in this season is the verses right before, don't get weary in well doing. And that's 6, 7, and 8. Galatians 6, 7, and 8. Be not deceived, God is not mocked. You reap what you sow. If you sow into your flesh, you're going to reap destruction. If you sow into your spirit, you reap eternal life. And this sowing and reaping into your spirit. So right now I can't try to make it happen on my own. I don't need to try to please my flesh. I don't need to try to please it with this job that sounds great or this opportunity or just rush into it as the people who are listening to this pod. You can go and try to do it on your flesh. You're going to reap destruction. Yeah. And so it's just really, it connects that, okay, don't get weary in well doing, because in due time you will reap. Yeah. But if only you've been sowing into your spirit. Yeah. So that's really been on me as a coach, as a leader in different seasons in life, is make sure you're sowing into your spirit, not your flesh. Don't try to make it on your own. God's got you. And just do that difficult, tough time. Like, don't get weary. Like, in due time. And I just leave this nugget. So what do you do in the meantime? When it's tough, when it's hard and you're struggling, do good to all people. Like, you got to be doing good. You got to be loving people. You got to be encouraging people. You got to be a light to them, even if you're in a tough time, because it actually helps you more than them, right? Yeah. So that for me has really resonated over the last year and the last couple months, just connecting with Galatians and the encouragement it is to me and the hope it is for the future too.
Omar, we ask every guest, what does redemption mean to you? Because we know there's a theological answer, but it's a very personal answer too. So can you share with us what redemption means for you?
Yeah, well, I think about just the definition of redemption, right? It's just acting, like the actual action of saving from your sin, from your error, from your wrongs, like just that God intervenes in your life and saves you from what you've done. And we've all had our struggles, our dark times, and things in life that we deal with, and we need a savior. We need redemption. Amen. In those moments, I need redemption. In my story, even from LSU as a player, like that moment, I knew that things were going to change. And thinking God's word is always changing from where you were to where God wants you to be and redeems you. So from Jacob to Israel, Saul to Paul, the story of redemption is about your life being changed and transformed and him taking to another place of where he really wants you to be.
Omar, you have modeled that transformation in your own life. You've made an impact on other people's lives. We thank you so much for sharing just a small portion of your life with us today. Thank you for driving down from Nashville to be with us in studio. It means a lot for us, and we are so thrilled that you came on the show today. Just blessings on you and your family.
Thank you for having me.